the healing technique, the healing power of wanting. So I'm sure a lot of you have been through the Buddhist circuit, the Hindu circuit, the Advaita Vedanta circuit, the Tantra circuit, the chakra circuit. And in a lot of these circuits, you get taught that the cause of all your problems is separation, identification with self, and then from that identification with a self, a personal self, there is then a seeking to find your freedom in pleasure and avoid pain. So pain is seen as the opposite of freedom, and pleasure is seen as freedom. And when I say freedom, it means your connection to the divine. So when there's separation, there seems to be a cutting off from that freedom. And then when there's an identification with the person, you always feel like there's something missing. So then there is a looking for that freedom in pleasure and the absence of pain. And that begins to appear in hallucinations about the perfect life, the perfect home, a lot of money. Money is the big one. Partner, kids, objects, computers, going to the moon. That's what we're taught in this subject, and it's true. Craving for, so the Buddhists actually don't call it wanting or desiring, they call it craving. This craving for freedom in the future is suffering. But the first initial problem is the identification with self, with an illusory self, living in an illusion. And then it's craving to find freedom in time. And the next big thing. And the mind is always doing it. It's always looking for what is it that's causing me to be unhappy, and what is it that gives me happiness. And it's always associating that. It works away, trying to work it out. And it runs. It's running all day and night. And it runs as an illusion that people generally aren't conscious of. They're not conscious that they're always going from one thing to another, to another, to another. The Buddhists call this suffering, so identification with self, and then the attempt to find freedom in pleasure or pain, or the avoidance of pain. So then, how can wanting be healing? So I suppose I will tell you my Tantric story, which I did by accident when I was about 11 or 12 years old. What happened was, I'm sure lots of you have heard this before, it's a slightly embarrassing tale, and I can't remember it exactly, so I'm sure that it changes every time I tell it, to an extent. But basically, I used to listen to music, so find this romantic music. You know how when you can listen to some music and you can't tell exactly what it is, but some music just touches your heart and just creates this feeling of love in you, and then you decide then you define that music as something that you like. And maybe this doesn't happen to all people, but to a lot of people, they can most probably recognize that some pieces of music just touch something really deep in them. So what I used to do was it depends where my mum and dad were. I'd either do it in my bedroom or do it in my mum and dad's lounge. And I put on this big headset and I would listen to pieces of music that made me feel like that. And then I would imagine the perfect boyfriend that I wanted. So the most ideal boyfriend and the most ideal life. And sometimes I would put like cushions around me. If I was in my bedroom, I'd put cushions around me as if he was hugging me. It depends where I was. And I did it lots, I did it often. And then I would imagine that. And as I imagined like the perfect life with him and everything that I wanted, sometimes it would be a girlfriend. I can't say that I just swing just one way. But it would predominantly be a boyfriend. And as I imagined that, I would begin to feel more and more fulfilled. Like I'd feel more and more love. And especially as I imagined the details, and my body would begin to vibrate at a very, you could say, like high frequency. And I feel like I was emitting love, even though I didn't even know what that was. But now when I look back, like it felt like this love was like pouring out of me. And then it would get to the point where like the imagination of him began to disappear, and then I would just be vibrating in love. And it's such a healing thing to do and such a beautiful thing to do. And basically what I think I was doing was, I had been taught and I believed that a boyfriend in the future would complete me. And then I also had like all the hormones and the chemicals for it. And then as I imagined it, I began to own that situation as if it was already happening or had happened. And then I would eventually get to the place where the love was there without the imagination of it. And then I began to realize, and I'm sure it to an extent it made like relationships a little bit tricky for me, because I began to realize that the love was in me. So I began to realize, before I'd even had a romantic relationship, that I already could feel that in loveness without a man being present or woman being present. So, and that's quite profound to get to that realization. I knew it without a doubt that I could generate that love without anyone doing anything or giving me anything, or without any circumstances changing. So that it was something in me. So that's very beautiful. And this is later in life. When I've got into spirituality, though, I began to stop doing this. I began to deny myself doing this because I thought it was craving and I thought it was bad in relationship to Buddhism. And then later on, I realized that actually I was meditating when I was doing it. It was really beautiful. What was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, later on, I think, I don't know if I said this, I found out later on that it was a Tantra practice. So it's something that they teach in Tantra. Particularly in the past, it was taught, I mean, I don't know really, like, I've not researched it that much, but from what I understand, it was particularly taught to men. And it was taught in that you would pick a goddess or your guru in which you were in love with. So predominantly someone that wasn't alive, but it could be your guru as well. And you would pick the one that you were in love with, like characteristics in which you felt really fulfilled with. And then you would use that image to do what I did. And it wouldn't be about getting her or having her in any way. It would be about generating that love. And then what you then also did was you then also projected that onto other women. So you'd go through these different stages. So you would feel this love for the guru. So you'd use her image to bring this positivity and this love. And then you would begin to see her in all other women, which is really beautiful. And then finally, you see it in yourself, that love is yourself, that you don't need anything to give you that. That's super beautiful. Beautiful. That's beautiful. And I understand that some people don't know what I'm talking about. My partner, who is soon to be my husband. Yeah. He explained to me that some people don't have such a vivid imagination. Like, I have a very vivid and creative imagination, and that's not a good thing or better thing or worse thing. And so for those that are more logical, I think this is a little bit more abstract and hard for people to do, to maintain their imagination. So I understand for some people this might not work, or this might seem really alien, but that's okay. You can still hear about it and never know, it might one day arise. So it it's maybe not for everybody, but maybe it is. Maybe there's different ways you could be creative if you've not got such a creative mind, like making like a board, an image that you actually look at. And then, so there's a technique that I use when I work with people one-to-one, and I think this is actually maybe quite a deep technique, in the sense that you have to already be able to feel your emotions in your body, which not everybody does. A lot of people have just become heads, and they kind of experience their emotions through what they think, and they can't connect it to the body. But in order to do this, you have to kind of be able to connect to the body, to know what it is your body is asking for. So in our bodies, who we truly are is not a thing. You might never have heard that before, but what that means is not a thing. It's not one thing in particular, which then by default means that you're everything. So your essence is all things. And then that essence appears to experience through one apparent thing. So it seems to have this experience as if it is one thing walking around in many things. But in awakening, you begin to realize, so your essence isn't divided. That which is experiencing is not separate from that which is experienced. So the looking and the seen are the same, the hearing and the heard. So what we think is, I hear inside my body, my ears are hearing. But actually, when you really go deep into experience, you realize there is nobody that's hearing. There's nothing that is hearing something. There is only hearing. There is only looking. There is only feeling. And there's not two things in that. And that comes from experience. That's not an intellectual thing which I'm teaching you. It's an experiential thing. So from that, then there is this place, even though it's not a place, where the apparent person meets the infinite. But it's not really a place. It just seems like a place. And that it meets that in the body. But then you also have to know that the body and the world are the same. So even though I say it's in the body, like it's in your body, it's actually that your body and the world are one. So you don't know outside seeing, you don't know outside hearing, you don't know outside feeling. Like everything that you're experiencing is inside the senses, is the senses. So actually your whole world is known through your senses. And there is no division in that. It's so beautiful. That this isn't, again, intellectual, this is experiential. And then there is this place where it meets, even though in another way you could deconstruct it and see that there is no place that it meets. And like prior to the illusory self, there is like this natural flow of wants. So there's this natural organic way in which life is directing the bodies. And then what happens when there's separation is the person that feels like it's self-aware is always interfering with that and judging that. And the reason that that formed is to help navigate the experience better. So we develop self-awareness so we could put more information into the machine and direct it in a better way. But then this person becomes obsessed with it, and then it begins to believe that happiness is found in choices and in pleasure, that freedom is found in pleasure. So it kind of begins to go crazy, and it begins to act everything out in this spectrum of trying to find freedom and in pleasure, which is illusory. So there is this helpful side to self-awareness, but then there is this crazy side that begins to form, where it gets obsessed. And this isn't, again, an intellectual thing. It's like a feeling, like this agitation, like this isn't right, and it's always trying to find something. And then what happens as you begin to awaken, and as this shift begins to take place, is you stop operating from this seeking energy, and you move down to your natural once again. There's still self-awareness that arises, but that self-awareness isn't based on an illusion that you are real and that freedom is found in the future. Like freedom is found somewhere else. So there's this natural self-awareness that can arise. But this illusory one that's always trying to find freedom in things begins to dissipate, and then there can be this natural acting. For me, I still have these seeking habits appearing on and off. So they, I think they become so deeply ingrained in the body that it's not necessarily that there's still a self there, although there could be. It's too hard to define where you are in the end. But it's more like a habit that gets acted out sometimes, that comes up and gets acted out. So in an argument or in disagreement or in a difficult situation. But what begins to happen is that you begin to act from this natural place, and it kind of feels, even though all of this is never going to be correct because you can't quite put this in words, it begins to feel like life is acting. So it's like life's desires rather than yours desires. So it just comes from this organic place. So it's almost like life, and where it meets and becomes human, you act from this place. Rather than when you're identified, you're acting from all these layers and ideas. And this place of acting isn't outside necessarily your habits and conditions as the body. The body follows habits and conditions, but it's this organic place, this natural place. Even though it's most probably following all the habits and conditionings of you, it is this more organic place. Whereas this is like they're constantly seeking and agitated, like, gotta get somewhere, blah, 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 blah. And so what I do when I'm working with people is try to guide them to their natural wants rather than their seeking wants. And that's the way in which the person orientates itself, and like without a self. And that's actually love. It feels like love, and it's really healing, and it's very natural. Like when you get to it. So you could say like your natural pleasure, your natural wants feel like love manifesting. Even the pains, the moving away from the pain, feel like love, but it's different. The pleasurable ones are expansive, and this is the way in which eventually balanced body-mind wants to operate from. And that's very risky and different from this self, because this illusory self has like got a whole story it's living by, whereas this other place is mysterious and doesn't come with logic, and it's unknowable. And when you connect to it and act from that place, even though it's not you connecting from it, it's just a dropping away of an illusion, it's like acting through love, and your natural desires are super healing and just in line and in balance. And what I do when I'm working with people is I try to get them to go back to that which makes them feel expansive rather than logic and what they believe they need or want. And it's like a technique I use, and it's also a technique that some people use in trauma healing as well. But in order to do it, there has to be a connection with the body, because these wants arise in the body. So it's like our body is like traffic lights. It's got 7 traffic lights called chakras, and they light up and they expand when they want you to go towards something, and they go dark and go more into pain when they don't want you to do something. And it's not logical. It's not like I'm going to cook my partner food because it's my turn to cook. It's unlogical. It's like a natural flow. And it's risky because you don't know what's going to come out. It's like sticking your hand into like having lots of different things you could do, and then sticking your hand in and picking it out. It's more than likely going to suit you though, and suit your life, because it's your body, and it's unlikely your body's going to tell you to go and do something really crazy. And in that, this is really healing. If I put it into non-duality term, like really like hardcore non-duality terms, like I'm trying to make this accessible to everybody, but if I were to put it into hardcore non-duality, it would be basically life is acting. So what I'm trying to describe is life acting. Like instead of you acting, it's life acting, like it's complete surrender to God's will, to life's will, which isn't yours. Even though you can't do anything to free yourself, because who is this you that's freeing yourself, I do believe that these techniques are really healing for the person to begin to get into the sense of what it is the body wants. What we're most of the time doing is we're living in this separate self, and this separate self has all these ideas of what it wants, and most of them are based on fear and craving and discomfort. They're based on a contraction. And a lot of the time what people are doing is they're actually running away from what they don't want. So their experience is always contracted. Because when you are moving away from what you don't want, it's painful, and it should be. And when you're moving to what you do want, it's open, it's expansive. And most of the time you should be moving to what you do want rather than running away from what you don't want. And there's a subtle difference. So when I was in India a couple of years ago, I got mugged, and I don't know, not like attacked, but these guys tried to attack me in India. This is years ago in 2011. But I was a fighter. I screamed and yelled and ran. But anyway, it traumatized my body. And when I was in India last time, I did a retreat near that area, and trauma came back up in my body. Like this Indian guy, like was telling me that the rooms were unsafe because they were made of glass and this, and it wasn't safe. Like I think it was just his paranoia coming up, but it then had an effect on me. And so what I did was I went back to my room, and rather than focusing on what I didn't want, to be raped or attacked or anything like that, I began to focus on what it is I did want, and what I wanted was safety, and safety for all the participants on the retreat, and love and beauty and comfort in that environment, and expandedness. And then eventually what happened, like my body went from this pain of feeling tight, is it expanded, and it felt like this light came around and protected everything. And that's really beautiful and healing from traumas. And it's also a really beautiful way to live and to act. And this is what we can do in everyday environment. So if we've got a colleague at work that keeps upsetting us, rather than focusing what it is upsets you about them and your relationship with them, which will make you feel tight and contracted, you focus on what it is you want to experience with them. And that is friendship, joy, laughter. And you keep moving to that, and that is an expansive feeling. And my belief is that like this world is made of magic, not logic. And if you put out that energy, you'll receive that energy. The complication is that most people don't know what it is they want and what it is that they're calling to themselves. And so when they try to do this, they can't really do it, because, say for that with the colleague, is that what might happen is that with the colleague, you're experiencing like pain with them, like you did with your mother. And sometimes you have to acknowledge these things. So you've got to acknowledge like why you're rejecting them and what's happening. So like with my trauma that happened in India, like I knew that trauma very deeply. So it was very easy for me to move it into what it is that I want. And I know all the connections to being female, like it's a big subject, like it's not just about those men like trying to rape me in India. It was also about, like what it is to be a woman, what it is for a woman to have lived in a patriarchal society. Like there's lots of things that are involved in that, like safety and like all the different things. So it wasn't just related to that. But what a lot of people can't do is they're not honest with themselves, but they don't even know they're not being honest with themselves. So like sometimes what you have to do is, so say with this colleague that you dislike, it reminds you of your mother, and you have to admit there's a part of you, there's words inside you that maybe hate the mother. So it's like when you see your colleague, your body is actually speaking to you, your body actually has a language, and even though it's not physical words, you can begin to feel it and touch into it, and it's like, I hate the mother, she's oppressive. And if you don't realize that that's what the body's doing, then you can't desire correctly. Like you can't establish what it is you want correctly, because you don't know what it is that you're running away from correctly. Because in a way you have to know what you're running away from in order to know what it is you want, truly want. Yeah. And that requires, paying attention to the body and getting to know the chakra, getting to associate this thought with the chakras and what it is that you're actually saying.